Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode at amazic.com where we talk to people about cloud native. Amazic.com is a tech journal where we talk about ideas and stuff that you can actually practice in your organization. And we focus specifically on the world of Kubernetes, cloud native. And I'm Twain Taylor, editor at amazic.com. And we have with us today someone from one of the pioneers, I'd say, in the field of cloud native and Kubernetes, someone from HashiCorp. They've got a tremendous lineup of products, Terraform that just so many companies use out there. Some really great products that they've been creating over the years. And we have with us today Sarah Polan, who is the field CTO at HashiCorp. Sarah, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, and if you can tell us, Sarah, a bit about how were you always into? So you actually just started your role at HashiCorp about 2 months ago or so. If you could just tell us, what's your focus in HashiCorp, and just what have you been doing in your career, and how do you get to this point? If you could sort of give us a brief intro about yourself and what you do, your interest, that would be a great start.
Yeah, sure, happily. So yeah, like you said, I just started with HashiCorp a few months ago, but I am not new to the HashiCorp stack. So previously to working with HashiCorp, I was working at ABN AMRO and working with their secrets management program over there and helping them figure out really how to integrate a holistic secrets management program for Kubernetes and cloud native. So I'm absolutely thrilled now to make the jump over to HashiCorp because I love the suite of products, but also because I really like what they're doing to the industry and how they look at the industry as more of this kind of workflow problem as opposed to a technology and tooling problem. And so what I'm really excited about and kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis is then sit down with decision makers and help them look at, okay, how do I go from A to B and implement all of these different products, but how do I do that in a homogenized workflow so that I can still maintain that velocity and security, and also make sure that I'm getting kind of the quickest iteration possible out of my development lifecycle.
All right, great. That's a great summary of what you've done so far and what you're focusing on right now. And you mentioned secrets management, so that's one of the things that I want to actually hone in on in our conversation today.
Sure.
I saw that you're doing a talk that's coming up in a few months. I saw it mentioned on the HashiCorp website, talking about fast secrets, and sounded interesting, piqued my interest. And I was wondering if you could share, give us a sneak peek of what's the key idea of that talk, and what's it about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're living in this world where our infrastructure is getting faster and faster. If you look at Kubernetes, Lambda, anything serverless, and the idea is really how fast can we make them? How can we make them scale as much as possible? And really leverage that to our benefit, both cost-wise and velocity-wise. But then what we don't really look at is the secrets behind them. And so I think you take a search certificate and the average certificate is what, valid 10 years, so longer than your average developer by far. And does it really make sense then to have such long-lived secrets and certificates and points of identity for things that don't really even exist anymore? So yeah, really deep diving into what does that look like and how do you kind of approach that?
Interesting. So seems like the focus is on the lifespan of certificates, and just making it more short-lived. But then for people who are managing certificates, that can seem like a nightmare, right? Because it would be a lot more certificates to have to manage, a lot more creation, deletion, all of that stuff.
Right.
How do you do that? How do you manage just that complexity and the scale?
Yeah, I think the only way you can manage that complexity and really scale that to something that's sustainable is through automation, both from a security standpoint, also from a toil standpoint. It's about workflows and patterns, and how do you identify those patterns so that you can automate them so that you maintain that velocity and the complexity. You deal with it once, but because that's a repeatable pattern, you can then use that same pattern time and time again to make sure that things are automated, that your certificates, they can be dynamic, you know. We have some customers who renew their certificates every 3 hours. Obviously, it's somebody who's very security conscious, and the vast majority, I think, of the industry doesn't need to be renewing their certificates on a 3-hour basis. But it can be done because it's automated. And that's really one of the functionalities also of Vault, is this idea of dynamic secrets, and how do you keep those constantly changing, so that you aren't stuck with the same secret or identity or authentication mechanism each time.
Yeah, so just this ability to manage secrets this way dynamically, it's more recent comparatively. It's probably in the past just a few years, maybe a couple of years, that it's the idea has been around.
For
If
sure.
you could just trace a bit of the evolution of how we got to this dynamic secrets, what were some of the early efforts, and what did they morph into, and how did we get to something like a vault?
So in terms of the creation of vaults, I would actually have to go back to Armin and ask, what the driving factors were for them for authentication, or for dynamic secrets. Working in the industry when I started, there wasn't really any best practices around secrets management. So in that aspect, I was very much kind of on the forefront, helping even author the OWASP paper about what do you need to consider when you're looking at secrets management. So I think we're still at a point where dynamic secrets have not become mainstream. And we probably have a couple more years before they start really gaining traction in that aspect. The idea of dynamic secrets is no longer something that's completely foreign to people, or you really have to sit down and like trace it out and say, this is how you would do it, and this is why it's beneficial. We're getting to a point in adoption where people are understanding how that's beneficial. And now it's a question of, how do you adopt it? What are the best practices behind adopting that? And conversely, that comes with the challenge, how do you find the SMEs who are capable of implementing this as well? So it's a whole new set of challenges, but it's really interesting, and I love seeing it evolve as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's possible, but it's not yet gone mainstream, and we're in that adoption phase. Yeah, if someone is thinking of, I want to draft a secrets management strategy, where do I start? If that's on their mind, how do they go about it? Do they look at their system, their stack, where it is at right now, different components? They start with that. Do they look at their organization, their team structure, or do they look at the tools? Where do they start?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a conglomeration of all of that. The first thing is, why are you looking at a secrets management program? Do you have a specific problem that you need to solve? Have you noticed that there's a lot of secrets in your VCS, for example, and you really just want to make sure that you don't have any secrets being pushed to GitHub? Then the next step, after you've decided why you want to solve this or what you're trying to solve, would really be, what does that secrets management lifecycle look like for you? And it's not just about the rotation of the secret or making it dynamic. It's about, how am I acquiring it? How am I authenticating to kind of use that secret or inject it into any of my applications? Then how do I rotate it? How frequently do I need to be rotating it? And lastly, how do I revoke that? And when do I revoke that? Does that need to be something that's revoked frequently? Can I just refresh the secret on a rotational basis? And also, what do your break the glass procedures look like? So if somebody breaches that specific credential, how do you handle that? So really, secrets management is about this entire life cycle, and you really need to be clear about how you're going to attack each one of these kind of individual problems before you start implementing tooling. And now, once you have all of those kind of set in place, you can say, okay, this is the type of tooling I need. Ideally, in 5 years, I want to make sure that my entire secrets management solution is completely automated. So I'm going to go for something like Vault. I know I have the governance within it that I need, that I have centralized secrets management. And then once you have your tool, you can set out looking at how are you going to automate those patterns. And then I would say, just be sure that you don't start too big. It's really easy to say secrets management. Oh yeah, no, it's super simple. It's just about acquiring little pieces of information. I think that's one of my major errors that I made early on, was that I thought secrets management was something that was kind of trivial and easy to implement. And it turns out that that's not the case at all. There are a lot of moving pieces. So don't be afraid to start really small and say, you know, I'm only going to do, I don't know, Kubernetes secrets for Java applications, for example. But once you establish what that looks like, what those patterns look like, many of those patterns are going to be repeatable. And so your velocity will then increase in terms of what you're able to accomplish. But if you start too big and say, hey, I'm going to go for all of the Kubernetes applications in the entire organization, what ends up happening is you try to kind of figure out what is the use case for all of those and all of the edge cases. And it really slows you down, and you're not able to grow it quite as holistically or quickly as you would like to.
Interesting. I think that's some great advice. I think, you know, just starting small, scoping out, you know, how wide you want to spread your secrets and all of that. You know, I want to ask about where does the responsibility actually fall, you know, within organizations, because, you know, there's different roles, and, you know, I'm sure you being in the space, you've seen every different combination of it. Sometimes you've probably even seen developers, you know, coming, you know, managing secrets for their own applications. You know, but where does it fall? Do you see this typically with the people who own the infrastructure, or do you see it with SecOps? Are there separate SecOps teams? What do you see?
I mean, you kind of see it all. And frequently what I've seen is that, you know, the secrets for the applications in and of themselves are typically owned by the DevOps teams, that certificates are owned by the crypto team, that anything infrastructure related is then owned by the platform team. And what I really love about Hashi and how we kind of look at the world is we're saying, okay, yes, you need all of these teams, you need these specialties, they need to be able to manage everything, but let's turn that on its side and make sure that instead of running in silos, that everyone's kind of working together. And then let's unify the workflow in terms of putting all of these things together. So whether you do that with something like Terraform, where you say, okay, I'm going to create a Terraform module for certificates, and that certificate is going to, or that certificate module is going to hit an API, and that API is then going to place that certificate in Vault. I think that's really where we need to be looking at, instead of which team owns which capability, because it's no longer a world where it's this very clear silo of who does what on a team. The faster things get, the more fluid these kind of environments become, and the more we try to move towards the self-service sort of world, the less clear and the delineation is. So it's really now about how do we make sure that all these things are working together, and how do we automate all of these patterns so that we can maintain that velocity and that security across the block and across the corporation.
That's some great points about just, you know, having people work together, you know, and breaking silos. Also wanted to dig in a bit about, you know, what you just mentioned last, which is about, you know, finding patterns that you can automate secrets management with. And if you just talk about, you know, automation, how, you know, what are some opportunities to automate secrets management? Yeah, just how it's done.
Yeah. So I think it really boils down to identifying those patterns initially. What are your deployment triggers? What are you trying to deploy? What are the most commonly used patterns? And then start with some of those most commonly used patterns. So in my last position, what we were able to do was actually make it so that secrets management wasn't felt by the teams. The teams didn't really know that it was running under the hood. They didn't know how Vault worked. A lot of them didn't even know Vault was there. It was just a question of, okay, we're going to deploy our application, and as part of that deployment, Vault is there, it onboards, and it's just part of the ecosystem in and of itself. But it's that pattern recognition and knowing what your various triggers are, what your events are that can help you do that.
All right, great. And there seems to be some overlap between secrets management and the authentication tools, the Oktas and all them, because there as well they talk about identities, and if you can trust an identity, then you allow them access. So how does secret management work with these authorization and authentication tools? What's the synergy between them? How do you look at them when you're thinking of them from a an architecture point of view?
Yeah, so if you're looking at this kind of idea of zero trust and wanting to incorporate zero trust, I think you're looking at kind of three principles and probably about 4 pillars. So the three principles would be that identity, so acquiring an identity for whatever you're trying to do, whether that's human or machine, authentication, and authorization. And then you want to look at that for basically human to machine. So the things that are the Oktas of this world, they do that really, really well. And that's not something we touch in general at Hashi. You have the machine identity, which is Vault, and Vault is really about this identity brokering, like we talked about it a little bit. So it's how does it verify the identity, what it is, and that's specifically machine identity. Then you have the machine to machine sort of pillar. So how does that work across networks, and how do you make sure that these machines are securely talking to each other? Again, based off of this principle of identity and authentication and authorization. And then you have kind of the person to machine. So how is that going to work? And that's kind of the privileged access management space. So Boundary, which was recently released into beta, for example, would be what we would use for privileged access management.
Okay. So, Boundary, is this a feature that Vault has, or is it a separate product itself?
No, Boundary is a standalone product. So it's something that's they've been working on now for a few years and was recently just released into public beta. So anybody can go to HashiCorp, the HashiCorp Cloud platform, and go ahead and give that a try.
Okay.
And I really, really like the product, to be perfectly honest. What it allows you to do is essentially use just-in-time credentials, and you can use that by leveraging Vault Identity under the hood if that's what you so choose. And then it's going to let me just tap into the resources that I need that are on the network. So a VPN will allow me to kind of identify myself and log into the network securely, but it's just going to shoot me out onto the network, and it's going to let me essentially touch anything that I want to within that network. Maybe, you segment that a little bit, so you only get a part of it, but it's really hard to just isolate specific things on the network. But Boundary will let you connect to a specific asset. So if I'm only allowed to connect to a specific virtual machine or a specific Kubernetes cluster, then Boundary will allow me just to be shot onto the network for that specific use case. All
right. Wow, sounds really interesting. So this is something I need to check out myself. I haven't.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, and so all of our viewers, Boundary is something new from HashiCorp, so do go and check it out. And I wanted to talk a bit about also just policies, and so policies as well help to really scale secrets management and just security on the whole. What do you see happening with policy, and how organizations use policies to manage secrets and other aspects of security as well?
Yeah, so I think with policies, what we're now seeing is it's not just secrets management, it's everything. What kind of VMs are you allowed to spin up, or what sort of kind of network rules are in place? And what that allows people to do is maintain their desire to use tooling that's available to them, that they know how to use, that's part of the cloud infrastructure and the ecosystem. But it makes sure that enterprises and companies can keep them within those guardrails. So we see a lot of companies putting policies on Terraform, for example, and making sure that, when they're spinning up their infrastructure as code, that's running within the parameters of the company itself. We can do that also secrets management. If we take Vault, for example, we can say only this specific identity is allowed to access a certain secret. Or conversely, if you're a human identity, you aren't allowed to access a secret at all. It's only this specific machine that can do that. But what that allows you to do is ensure that things are going to plan. Now, if you have hands-on keyboard, it's not the same effect. You know, your administrator might know that they aren't allowed to spin up an extra large machine, but they know somebody, or they're just going to fudge the rules this time and they're going to spin up the extra large machine. Or conversely, maybe they just fat finger something. They add an extra 0, and instead of 100 instances, you have 1,000 instances. So by putting policies in place, you're ensuring that automation, again, of essentially the rules. So not only are you playing within the guidelines or the rules, if you have an audit, it also makes it a lot easier, because then you just show the auditor, hey, no, this is in place. This is the policy. See here, these are the types of machines you can have. These are how often the secrets have to be rotated. So not only is it helping kind of keep your developer fleet in line, it's also helping you with regulations and further like compulsory auditing and things like that too.
Really interesting. So we're winding down, and if I could ask you lastly, about just Vault, and what are you most excited about, with Vault? Any of the recent features that have been launched, anything, or something that's even upcoming? If you could talk a bit about Vault and just what you're most excited about with Vault.
Yeah, sure. I think probably one of the things that I've been waiting for a really long time is the dynamic service accounts for Kubernetes.
Okay.
So in June, they released dynamic service accounts for Kubernetes, which means we can now have that revolving kind of jot, and you're no longer bound to just this one. So yeah, that was definitely something that, coming from the security side of things and working with Kubernetes a lot, I was very excited to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just secrets, even the service accounts are dynamic then.
Yeah, we can make the service accounts dynamic now.
Okay, wow. So is that already out, or is it coming
Nope,
up?
it's out.
Oh, okay, neat.
Go
Wow.
play.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. That was fun. Thanks for sharing generously from your experience, your insights on what you see in the space, and even what you guys are working on there with Vault, and really exciting all of the stuff that you shared. It was a
Absolutely.
pleasure chatting with you. But before you go, we've got a couple of questions for you, just to get to know you a little better. So your first question, let's start with something easy. Let's see. Okay, a skill or something that you picked up during the pandemic, a skill or an interest or a hobby.
I went back to a childhood interest, which is not computer related at all, but still problem solving. So I went back to climbing and bouldering during the pandemic. I had an outdoor bouldering gym near me, and it was a way to kind of get out of the house since everybody was there all the time. And yeah,
wow. Wow, sounds fun. So yeah, you talk a lot at conferences. Want to ask, do you remember any of your talks that you're really nervous about? Maybe something from the early years?
I think it was probably my first conference, because somebody approached me, asked if I would be interested in doing it. I said, sure. I had no idea about any of the content would look like or what they were expecting. And so I kind of just pulled it out of thin air and was like, oh, I hope this is somewhat appropriate for this conference. But it landed happily. I'm very glad.
All right. How long ago was that?
That was maybe about 3 years ago now.
Oh, okay.
It was for DevOps days in Amsterdam.
Okay, cool. And what's your favorite part about conferences?
So I come from a performing background. Before I was in tech, I was an opera singer. And
Wow.
So for me, it's a way to be back on stage and performing. So I love it. It kind of marries the two worlds, which I'm both very fond of.
Amazing. Wow. I didn't know that. Yeah. So your favorite tech website or influencer, anyone that you follow?
I actually really love Wired. I like what
Okay.
Wired does in terms of giving the tech outlook, but then it
Mhm.
always puts a human interest on it. And I really find that quite interesting, especially as you start looking at
Mhm.
strategy and how the world is evolving and talking with people. It gives it a
Mhm.
really like nice humane twist.
Neat, neat. Wow. Your last question, the last thing that you Googled, if you can remember it.
Boxing gloves.
Oh, okay.
I just started
Wow.
boxing and was looking to acquire a new pair of boxing gloves. So
Gosh. Yeah, you have a nice mix of like the physical activity stuff, and then you're like an opera singer, and
I really like the
quite a
physical activity.
combination.
Yeah. No, I love the physical activity. It helps me process things a little bit. So if I need to come up with a talk or something like that, I lace up the running shoes and I just go. And it all kind of comes out in the wash, I guess you could say.
Wow, that's awesome. It was a pleasure talking to you, Sarah. Thanks so much for
Okay.
joining us today.
Thank you
Thank
for
you so
having me.
much. And all of our viewers, do go and check out HashiCorp and all that they do, the new product Boundary. And Sarah, where can people find you online?
The easiest place is LinkedIn.
Okay,
So
cool. All
just
right.
Sarah-Polan.
All right, cool. Yeah, so do connect with Sarah, and also visit amazic.com because we've got a lot more stuff like this over there. We've got talks with different other influencers from the Kubernetes cloud native space. And we've also got event coverage, we've got job listings. So there's a whole lot of stuff happening. So please head over to amazic.com. It's a great place. With that, we'll say bye to everyone. Thank you for joining us. Do watch the episodes that are coming up again. Thank you, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.